Tonight on the newscast, we need to start out acknowledging Lynn Whitesides passed away this morning. One of the September 6th, she was disfellowshipped on September 14th, 1993. Paul Toscano, I think, says it best when he said, "My friend, Lynn Whitesides died this morning. This is a very sad news. Lynn was funny and deeply compassionate. She was also possibly the only person in Mormon history ever to be permanently disfellowshipped. I'm the last of the September 6 excommunicated from the LDS Church in 1993, who is not passed away or rebaptized." And so tonight we remember Lynn Whitesides. Welcome everybody to the Mormon Newscast, RFM, Rebecca Biblioteca. Glad to have you along. Anything you want to say there? Otherwise, we'll jump right into the stories for tonight.
I'm guessing he had to add the part about either passed away or rebaptized because of Abraham Gileadi.
Abraham Gileadi.
And Maxine Hanks, who also got rebaptized as well. But yeah, the two of them.
So when you're permanently disfellowshipped, what happens then after you pass away? I mean, we know Lavina was, rebaptized posthumously. What happens in that case?
I don't know. Your disfellowshipment is lifted somehow through some kind of quasi ordinance.
Yeah, that's what I wondered. I don't know.
Yeah. So, folks, the stories tonight, LDS Church Shanghaied, and that's brought to us by Radio Free Mormon. No casting your net in Elko, Nevada. Is that you, Rebecca?
That's me.
We also have some news on a Madison temple.
Yeah.
We've got wheat, water, and wishful thinking. LDS baby name setting trends nationwide. Tom Christofferson gains forgiveness, a youth night walk, and a real life footloose situation in Provo, Utah. And with that, let's jump into our first story. It's all yours, Radio Free Mormon.
Thank you, Bill. Questions abound. Hang on a second here. There we go. I thought it skipped. The LDS Church suffers a setback in China as government shuts down congregations in Beijing and other cities. This is from the Salt Lake Tribune, Peggy Fletcher Stack, July 4th, 2025. Now, here we go. Questions abound for heartbroken branch members as Mormon faith seeks to adapt to changing environments. In recent months, several Chinese municipalities across the giant Asian nation, also known as China, have shut down congregations of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints without warning, citing a failure to register with the government. The closed branches range from Nanjing in the eastern province of Jiangsu to Jilin province in the north. The most recent banning, however, was aimed at the two branches in the capital of Beijing, one for expatriates and one for Chinese worshipers who, under the law in China, have to worship separately. On June 22nd, the Civil Affairs Bureau of the Chaoyang District in Beijing announced that the Mormon Beijing branch carried out activities in the name of social organizations without registration, which violated the provisions of the regulations on the administration of social organization registration. Accordingly, the edict declared the Beijing branch is hereby banned. The global church, headquartered in Salt Lake City, has never been one of the five faiths legally recognized in China. So it sounds like for the entire time that they've been there in the Shadowland. They are not legal in China. They're not legally recognized in China. They just were sort of allowed to operate on a, provisional basis. It's a strange thing. Maybe not so strange there as here. I'm not sure. But the Mormon Church has never been one of the five faiths legally recognized in China. Those are Buddhism, Catholicism, Islam, Protestantism, and Taoism. I don't know if the Mormon Church is regretting all the time it's spent distancing itself from the Catholics and especially from the Protestants now, and maybe trying to make up for that by becoming more Protestant with each passing day. Taoism is the only native Chinese faith. The others all were imported. But it has operated openly for more than 2 decades, even though not recognized by the law, apparently. Say Latter-day Saint experts on China who didn't want their names used because they were not authorized to speak about this. Okay. Now that's a huge clause in the middle. What these experts who want to remain anonymous are saying is that the church has operated openly in China for more than 2 decades with the tacit understanding of the Religious Affairs Bureau and other government agencies. As part of this understanding, Chinese members of the church and foreign members of the church in China have been organized into separate congregations. So even though it may not be on the books, this understanding appears to have a life of its own and several component parts. So they're there at all under an understanding, and under the same understanding that unnamed people representing the church have with unnamed people representing the Chinese government, then they can do it, but they have to have Chinese nationals, Chinese citizens, meet separately from the expatriates or non-Chinese members of the church who were over there. When asked about the latest clampdown, the Mormon Church did not comment directly on the status of the branches in China. In fact, they didn't say much of anything. Here's what they did say. And this is Doug Anderson, who is acting as the spokesperson instead of Aaron Sherinian, who should be. Here's what Doug Anderson says. The church strives to honor, obey, and sustain the law. I'm sorry, I have trouble reading that anymore with a straight face. Let me try it again. The church strives to honor, obey, and sustain the law in every country and encourages its members to do the same. Spokesperson Doug Anderson said Friday, well, apparently not giving an explanation as to how it is the church is operating in China, even though it's not recognized by the law. He says, in places where laws are evolving, that would be like what? Any place? And subject to interpretation, which would be like everywhere. It seeks understanding through dialogue and adapts to changing environments as needed. I don't know who wrote this, but this is pap. So in places where laws are evolving, all he's saying is that we believe in honoring and sustaining the law, but in China, we're kind of skirting the edges, okay? We may not be breaking the law, but we are bending it as much as we can. And now the bending branch has snapped back, I think, for some reason, which really hasn't been explained, I think. The June 22nd Beijing edict appeared to be primarily aimed at the branch for Chinese nationals. So the citizens, right? Experts say. But because the congregation for Chinese members and the branch for foreign ones meet in the same facility at different times, their underlying lease was affected. So lease is gone, and anybody who was meeting there, whether they're Chinese nationals or the non-Chinese members, nobody can meet there anymore. Expats meeting on Zoom. In the aftermath of the government's moves, the president of the English-speaking branch in Beijing sent an email last week to his congregants saying, we are transitioning to online church meetings via Zoom beginning this Sunday, June 29th. Leasing discussions are underway with the Jintai Building Management. We plan to meet in this manner, by Zoom apparently, until further notice. Members say the church's signage, subtle though it was, has already been removed. Now, this, of course, is the temple in Hong Kong. As a member who has participated in the daily activities of the LDS Beijing branch, I am heartbroken. Jiang Zhen, who now lives in Salt Lake City, wrote in an email to the Salt Lake Tribune. She goes on, the church strictly abides by China's laws and regulations and strictly prohibits members in China from actively preaching and even strictly prohibits Chinese believers from meeting with American believers. These are not just in the laws and regulations, but I have seen them with my own eyes, by which I understand her to mean that she's actually seen that the church obeys the laws and regulations herself when she was over there. Disallowing the congregation to meet in person will affect the religious life of hundreds of church members in Beijing, China, including more than 100 members of the first branch of foreign members, Shen added, many of whom are staff members of the U.S. Embassy in China. Latter-day Saint Chinese experts point out that this latest crackdown is not just aimed at branches, but is focused on many other non-governmental organizations and faith groups with headquarters outside of the Asian nation. On top of that, they say, many of these harsh consequences originate with local districts and may not necessarily be coming from the central government. So here in the story, they quote experts who say this is probably just local. It's not coming from the center of the government, right? We'd probably be saying this is just like, city or state or county, and it's not coming from the federal government. But the very next person they quote thinks the opposite. On the other hand, Latter-day Saint attorney Cole Kapaner, who has lived and worked in China for nearly 4 decades, believes these developments point to a wider effort. Given the proximity in time and the scope of the closures, he said, I suspect that this is part of a national campaign directed from Beijing. But everybody has guesses and nobody knows at this point, I think. Shanghai Temple still stalled. That seemed to be the case 5 years ago after President Russell M. Nelson announced that a temple would be built in Shanghai, and local Chinese officials pushed back. That was in April 2020, you may recall. Within days of Nelson's remarks, the Shanghai Municipal Ethnic and Religious Affairs Bureau said twice on its website it knew nothing about a Mormon temple being built in the city of more than 24 million people. And I think part of the problem may have been, I can't guarantee this, okay? Obviously, somebody wasn't talking to somebody else or something got messed up in translation. But the way it's announced, and we're going to get to that announcement here at the end of the story tonight. President Nelson in April 2020, at the end of General Conference, when he announced this, made it clear it wasn't going to be a new temple being built. I think he made it clearer than Gordon B. Hinckley made it about tithing not being used for, the City Creek Mall. And he just says it's going to be part of the structure where they're already meeting. So I'm guessing it was in this very building where they were having the meetings. And I picture sort of an office kind of building where they're leasing out some space. It's not a separate church. But and then they had in that space the 2 different branches meeting of the Chinese nationals as well as the non-Chinese members of the church. And that's the one they lost the lease on. What I envision is they would have just done something special in there, just as a small word, for completely redoing the whole idea of temples, right? Instead of building a temple, that will have a temple that will sort of set up in a leased area in a small building and maybe lower some veils like they did in Kirtland. I don't know. It never got there. But I'm just wondering if that was the problem, getting lost in translation, because, boy, it really triggered a response from China. And here is, I want to read what's on this, this slide here. According to relevant Chinese laws, this is from the Shanghai Municipal Ethnic and Religious Affairs Bureau office. And this is their response. According to relevant Chinese laws and regulations, foreigners are not allowed to establish religious organizations or set up places for religious activities in China. The American Mormon Church released information about building a so-called temple in Shanghai, but our city's religious and religious departments were completely unaware of it. This is wishful thinking on the part of the American Mormon Church and a fabrication out of nothing. So, the Bureau first wrote, foreigners are not allowed to establish religious organizations or areas of religious activities within China's borders. We read that part. And they also said in the other statement, and the news that the American Mormon Church announced that it is building a temple came only from the American side. But I do see that verb being used over and over again about building. Later, the Shanghai organization repeated the statement about foreigners, insisting it knew nothing about the American Mormon Church building a so-called temple in Shanghai. To this day, the church has not announced a site or released a rendering of a temple for China's most populous city. I mean, if they're not building it, I don't know why they would release a rendering. Or maybe I'm misunderstanding President Nelson. We'll play him, and everybody else can get your own take on what it is he's saying. Eventually, one expert says he believes the expats will find a way to work within the system to register the faith and be able to meet again in person, given that members have already agreed not to proselytize or discuss their religion with others. Now, that's only for the expats, the non-Chinese nationals. He is more concerned about future congregations of Chinese nationals, many of whom joined the church in Utah or other countries. Will they ever be able to meet in person or even online? Or will they be permanently blocked from worshiping together? So whereas the non-Chinese nationals are meeting by Zoom, I think that the Chinese nationals, they're not meeting at all by Zoom or otherwise. And that is that story. The next slide that I have, though, is a couple of minutes of President Nelson when he announces the 8 temples that he announced there. The last one, of course, is the Shanghai Temple. He gets misty about it. But he talks about, it's very important to keep this in context, and this is where I'm getting the idea that he's not talking about building a new temple, but just having having temple ordinances in a leased structure.
Today, we are pleased to announce plans to construct 8 new temples in the following locations: Bahia Blanca, Argentina; Tallahassee, Florida; Lubumbashi, Democratic Republic of the Congo; Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania; Benin City, Nigeria; Syracuse, Utah; Dubai, United Arab Emirates; and Shanghai, People's Republic of China. In all 8 locations, church architects will work with local officials so that the temple will harmonize with and be a beautiful addition to each community. The plan for a temple in Dubai comes in response to their gracious invitation, which we gratefully acknowledge. Context for the plan for Shanghai is very important. For more than 2 decades, temple-worthy members in the People's Republic of China have attended the Hong Kong China Temple. But in July 2019, that temple was closed for long-planned and much-needed renovation. In Shanghai, a modest multi-purpose meeting place will provide a way for Chinese members to continue to participate in ordinances of the temple in the People's Republic of China for them and their ancestors. In every country, this church teaches its members to honor, obey, and sustain the law. We teach the importance of the family, of being good parents and exemplary citizens. Because we respect the laws and regulations of the People's Republic of China, the church does not send proselyting missionaries there, nor will we do so now. Expatriate and Chinese congregations will continue to meet separately. The church's legal status there remains unchanged. In an initial phase of facility use, entry will be by appointment only. The Shanghai Temple will not be a temple for tourists from other countries.
RFM.
So there's the clip. And when President Nelson says the church's status remains unchanged in China, that's not a good thing. In other words, they're not recognized by the law. I think that's what he means when he says that. Your thoughts?
I put up here this image because the Shanghai Temple seemed like it needs to be talked about, right? Mormonism is led by prophets. They can see around corners, according to Sherry Dew and others. And they announced a temple in China, and China seemed to be saying, we didn't know anything about that, nor would we ever allow that. And it seems sort of strange that a prophet, seer, and revelator seem to miss that. And so I added this image as well, with Mormon prophets getting to the corner. They should be able to see around it. And meanwhile, the Shanghai temple, like all the other things in church history, have seemed to catch them off guard. They weren't ready for any of it. And I find that at least interesting. And it's one of those things that once it happened and the Shanghai temple was pulled back, it got stuffed into a closet, the whole story. And no one other than this side of things talks about it at all.
Yeah, I think Mormon prophets can see around corners. The problem is they can't see over the horizon.
There you
Rebecca, your thoughts?
Well, I, of course, always track temples, no matter where they're announced or where they're built. And of course, this announcement, everybody was just, so excited about it. And there was an article in the Church News that came out right after President Nelson's announcement. I can understand why people think that there's going to be a temple built, because it says the Shanghai People's Republic of China temple will be built in or near Shanghai.
So they said built as well.
This is what I'm saying. This is very
What's this
soon after.
multi-purpose thing? Yeah, this idea of a multi-purpose building, which sounds more multi than just church use, to try and somehow get around this law, which is actually a law, I believe, and not just one of these informal understandings that you can't be building churches in China.
Yeah, I think so too. But I can see why people misunderstand and think there's going to be a temple, because it goes on to say the People's Republic of China, the site, location, and architectural rendering has not yet been released. That sounds like any other temple, right? Remember when they announced Moscow? Same kind of thing. So this is 2020 in the Church News. Exactly. That's the article that I pulled up. So of course I track these things. Now in 2024, the Church News put out an article about, let's see where the temples are at right now. What's the progress? And Shanghai was not included in the list of 168 temples that had been announced or were in progress or were having groundbreakings. It wasn't there at all. And a lot of us talked about that and took note that it had disappeared. Well, I thought before I mention that tonight, I better double check again. I pulled up, the church website, and it's back on the list. It doesn't have any information, of course. There's no groundbreaking, no site, nothing, but it's back on the list. So it was there, it was gone, it was there. I'm not sure what that means.
I'm not sure how they're going to be building or using a temple if they can't even meet for church.
Exactly. And could I just bring up one other point? I think I told you about this, RFM, when we were talking before the show. I was on Faithful social media, I think about 6 months ago, and a post kind of popped up. And the person said, if I remember correctly, something about they're in China, they're meeting in a branch there. They're wondering, because there's a lot of scrutiny. They talked about not being able to maybe get materials. Perhaps their signage was disappearing. Some of the leaders, were not able to show up. They were definitely expressing concern on this Reddit Faithful social media thread. Now, members wrote back, you better not post here. You better go ask, somebody in Hong Kong. You better ask your officials. You better not say anything here on this thread. I didn't take pictures. I should have. But the next time I checked it, a couple hours later, the whole thread was gone. So I feel like it's been dicey for a while. There's been a lot of scrutiny, and they've been operating, kind of on this certain level. And now officially they are told, no more.
Believing Mormons believe that God himself or his son or the Holy Ghost tells President Nelson where to put the temples. And if President Nelson chose to announce a temple, believing he had a revelation, and that temple isn't able to be built because the country had no way that they were going to allow that, doesn't that say something about the process of revelation?
It probably says as much as the Jackson County temple from almost 200 years ago.
Yeah, well, probably.
It's still not built.
Still
for those of you who don't know. Maybe the Beijing temple will have the same fate in another 200 years. It'll still be unbuilt.
Well, since we're on the topic of temples, we ought to cover some other temple news that's going on.
But I have to say something.
Please.
As long as you don't put a deadline on it, as long as President Nelson doesn't put a deadline on it or say something dumb like it'll be built in this generation, he's home free.
It'll happen sooner or later, huh? There you go. That's how you get off the hook when you can't see around the corner.
The joke being, for those of you who don't know, is that, of course, in the scriptures and the Doctrine and Covenants, God Almighty said that the temple in Jackson County would be built in this generation.
And a generation could be, according to LDS apologists, could be 1,000 years, at least a millennia, perhaps.
It's got to be at least 200 years because that sucker still isn't up.
There we go. Well, on to some other temple news. Rebecca Biblioteca, you've got some breaking news going too, and I'll turn it over to you for the stories that you've got around the temples.
Yeah, I absolutely do have some breaking news. And I feel like, God is not that powerful if, all these pesky men and politics and governments can stand in his way. And it seems like the only thing God knows for sure is how high a steeple has to be in a certain area, right? There is no wiggle room on that. It has to be a certain height one place. It has to be he is not helping starving children. He is pointing to where the steeples need to go and how high they have to be. God's an architect. So yes, Fairview, Texas LDS Temple, there was a live stream meeting of their Board of Adjustments to talk about this whole protest zone thing we've been covering on the newscast. And we kind of kicked around the idea, hey, maybe we should live stream that, instead of doing the newscast. Well, it's a good thing we didn't. The meeting lasted, what would you say, RFM? 1 minute?
5 minutes.
5 minutes?
They had to talk about all the procedures around their meeting, and then they voted unanimously they don't have jurisdiction and adjourned.
Exactly. So the purpose of the meeting, it said a public meeting is to determine the board's jurisdiction and to hold a hearing on the appeal if deemed necessary. So they were going to talk about, do we even have the authority to hear this appeal from the Fairview residents, where they say that the signatures and petition, that they collected met the threshold that a supermajority would have been needed to pass the temple. There was no supermajority. Therefore, in their mind, in their lawyer's mind, the temple did not pass. So the meeting, just very quickly, the board determined that they have no jurisdiction on the appeal. So the appellate, that's Fairview, goes to district court. Anything you want to say about that, RFM? I guess that's just the next natural step then.
I had to laugh though when I think it was the mayor was talking about, I just had it on my phone so I could see little people down there and hear what was going on. But I think he talked about how they were relying, the board, the city council was relying on their on legal advice from their lawyer, right?
Yep.
And so I thought, well, I hope that legal advice is better than the legal advice that got you in this pickle in the first place.
Well, I think it is. And it wouldn't have been the mayor. This was just the Board of Adjustment. The mayor was watching remotely, as I understand it. And basically, they brought in additional legal counsel to advise this board on what their authority actually was. And I guess we see here that their counsel said, nope, you got nothing to say on this. Let's bump it up to appellate court. So we will see. And we were talking before the show, it really could just kind of go back and forth because they could bump it back down, right? And the temple would be in limbo for a while. I'm not sure what's going to happen.
No, we'll have to see. I think it'll be interesting. And as I understand it, the main issue, if not the sole issue on appeal, is whether the city council had to have a supermajority in order to pass the design.
Yep,
that's really
exactly
what it is,
right.
Isn't it?
Yep, that's all that it is. They calculated a protest zone, and we talked about this before, and they calculated a percentage of land area and the owners that represent that land, and they determined that the Fairview residents who sent in letters saying we protest this did not meet that threshold of 20%. Well, they calculated by using some homes that were in Allen, Texas, not even in Fairview. So, of course, the Fairview residents are saying, wait a minute, you miscalculated that. And if you calculate it correctly without Allen, we met that threshold. You needed a supermajority to pass it. You did not have a supermajority. Therefore, the temple did not pass. So while it's not about the LDS temple, it's about procedures within the town. It can affect the LDS temple. So we'll keep following it, of course.
It's already affecting the LDS temple.
Yeah, exactly. Because they can't
start. It's not being built already.
Yeah, they can't do anything. Yep, that's exactly right. So we'll see what happens. All right, so that was breaking news in Fairview. And I actually taped the little short meeting, so I'll put that out after here. It was just very quick. They said, no, not us. Pass it to someone else. Went very fast. Okay, another temple that just got approval, sounds like it just sailed through, was the Madison, not Wisconsin, but Alabama. It's known as the Huntsville, Alabama temple, but as they often do, they build it somewhere other than where the name is. And it says the Madison board recommends approval of the new Mormon temple with a 120-foot spire. This is the planning and zoning. I'm sure by now all of you guys understand this, how a new building goes to planning and zoning. They make a recommendation, and then later the city council in each town will vote and give it final approval. It says a new temple for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints won approval from Madison's zoning board on Thursday. The LDS Church plans to build a one-story, 30,000 square foot temple topped by a 120-foot spire, and it would be the second temple in Alabama. I guess they have a lot of saints in Alabama. I didn't know that for sure, but they need 2 temples. It says the zoning board recommended the city approve a special exemption. Again, that's what we talk about in almost every temple. They can't build where they want to build, what they want to build, so they have to get a special exemption. It's going to be taller than what's allowed. And the church has sought to allow a religious building on the property's current zoning, high-density residential. Now, that's a little different. It's not R1, it's R3. High-density residential. And according to the zoning board report, the LDS Church plans to include a tower, a cupola, or a spire that will exceed the 50-foot height limit for the zoning types. Of course they do. When have we ever seen them not try to exceed those zoning laws? But as the planning and zoning found, the 120-foot spire, according to the report, is not significantly massive or bulky, and the main level of the building is below the 35-foot height limit for high-density residential zoning. So they have no problem with this building. Therefore, the structure should not have an adverse effect on adjacent property or the character of the neighborhood. And again, this is high density, so it could be condos, it could be, apartments. So maybe not quite as much of a problem there. So, but again, the same thing. They have to have an exception because it's going to exceed the zoning. But in this case, they didn't seem to have a problem. It's going to go to city council next and probably sail right through there unless some residents decide they want to try to, make a fuss.
And why would they really?
And why would they?
Unless they're Satan's helpers.
Exactly. But again,
I did some research.
Oh, did you?
The church claims 40,000 members in Alabama, which means if you're looking at active Mormons, it's probably around 12.
20% of that. And then
so maybe 500
of those have active temple recommends.
So 20% of 40. It wouldn't be 5,000. That'd be 20% of 50, right?
Yeah. But then about a fifth of those have temple recommends, and about, it kind of goes down from there.
Here. You just keep going. Okay, I'm going to do some math.
Yeah, you're going to keep doing some math. There you go. Yep. So the interesting thing about this temple, however, is that it is going to be on 14 acres. Okay. So a 30,000 square foot temple on 14 acres, that's okay, right? Fairview, we're talking about, this massive temple, of course, reduced now, but on a very small acreage, right? So it makes a difference how close this temple is going to be to the other buildings around it. So, okay, now let's talk about Elko, Nevada LDS Temple here. We've reported on this before. There are 20,000 LDS members in the county there in Nevada. And so I don't know, do that math. And if you trickle down, probably around, 500 that might go to the temple. Anyway, Elko, Nevada Temple is almost finished. It's getting ready for its open house. And as we reported before, it built in an upscale neighborhood. And as you often find in an upscale neighborhood, there's a golf course right next to it. And when we talked about this before, they were concerned a little bit about this golf course. Would this interfere with the operation of the temple? Now, the golf course has been there forever. The temple built after the golf course, so they kind of knew what they were getting into. So,
they came to the nuisance.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it says, hold on a second. The Elko City Planning Commission Tuesday denied the LDS Church's permission to erect a net. That's right, you heard it, a net to protect the patrons of the newly built temple from errant golf balls coming from the adjacent Ruby View golf course.
That's a famous golf course, isn't it?
I don't know. Are there famous golf courses in Elko, Nevada? Maybe there are, but it has been there a long time. It's been there a long time. It's a beloved golf course that has been in the city for a long time. The governing board cited objection to the proposed 127-foot height of the netting, saying it would detract from the aesthetics of the course and the surrounding neighborhood. So, of course, I had to put in a picture of Jesus golfing. There he is. But they're concerned.
He's got good form. One might say he has perfect form.
I know. His golf club's a little long, but
he gets bored with golf because it's 18 every round.
Exactly. And this is the fourth hole that we're worried about. The fourth hole is right beside the temple, and they're worried about their patrons, right? Being struck from on high, not even metaphorically, but actually physically. Church officials expressed safety concerns, noting they had found already around 200 golf balls on the property each year since construction started in May of 2022.
You know how much those cost nowadays? They should consider themselves lucky.
That's what I feel like. And what a surprise. You decide to build next to a golf course and you find golf balls on your property. This is again, not seeing around corners, perhaps.
But they haven't hit any cars or patrons or anything, have they?
It hasn't said that yet, but this is what they're trying to head off. You know, my grandparents lived right next to a golf course in Nebraska. And as a kid, we had tons of fun collecting the balls that were over there. They literally had a garbage pail full of golf balls that they had found in their front yard because they lived right there. And it sounds like this is what's happening at the temple. It says no one can say whether the balls were directed as a result of malicious behavior or just from bad golfing at the city course. So I don't know who's saying that. I don't know if the church is claiming you guys are aiming for our temple or if the city's saying that, but somebody's concerned that they may actually purposefully be aiming at the golf course.
Are you saying that God can't even stop the balls of the Gentiles?
You know, those Gentiles have some balls, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
So the city of Elko installed surveillance cameras and signs urging the golfers to use caution at the fourth hole at Ruby View. It is not known if this has reduced the number of the stray golf balls. And there's the city council right there as they're discussing and saying, no, we just don't want a net. Sorry. Kind of like you guys knew what you were building next to, right? The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints hope to win approval to construct the safety netting in time for the open house, which is going to start, in about a month and a half. The church can appeal.
They haven't really even had any patrons there then.
No, they've just had workers and construction since 2022. And they're saying they have already found all these golf balls. But I mean, they can see what possibly could happen, right? They can appeal, but it was a unanimous rejection to put up this giant net. So I don't know. We'll have to keep our eye on this. We'll have to keep our eye on the ball on this story, right? That's crazy. And then
Good one, Rebecca.
What?
Good one.
Yeah, I thought so too. My final temple slide is we've all been following Lori Vallow's most recent interview where she talks about, President Nelson and visiting with Jesus. And she talks a lot about the temple. And I just had to make this comparison, how, President Nelson and other church leaders talk about, how you're edified when you go to the temple, how, you become this great person when you go to the temple, how only good people go to the temple. The rest of us who can't get in, we're not so good. And here's Lori Vallow, who says in her interview, I went to the temple every day for like 3 years. So take that for what it is. But she did. She went to the temple every single day for 3 years.
You would think that would help.
You would think it would have some impact. Yeah. She even claimed that she went to the temple with Chad and Tammy, his wife. That was something new I had not heard before in that interview. So anyway, kind of interesting. Okay. That's the end of my temple news. I think is it Bill's story next? I think so.
It is. I'm again, going back to the China story. I'm just surprised that when you're the one true and living church upon the earth with which the Lord is well pleased, you can't just say a prayer and get a net built.
Yeah. No.
You can't even get a net put up.
No, you can't get the net put up. You can't get the members meeting in China. You can't get the temple built in Shanghai.
Nothing is going the way of Jesus's church.
That's how you know it's true.
It's all going sideways.
It's all this persecution, damn it. There wouldn't be this much persecution against a church that wasn't true.
Yeah, everything's going sideways, including the balls off the end of the clubs of those golfers. So our next story here, there was an article in the Salt Lake Tribune about food storage. I didn't even know the church was still emphasizing this, but Eli McCann, and by the way, Eli McCann is a gay man. That is a picture of him and his husband, Skylar. So Eli McCann is a writer from time to time. I think he's written 2 or 3 articles for the Salt Lake Tribune. This one's titled Food Storage and 72-Hour Kits in Doomsday Sermons. Oh my, I'll be ready for that dreaded day someday. Eli McCann humorously recalls his childhood in a devout Latter-day Saint family during the late 80s and 90s, where regular 72-hour kits, audits, and food storage drills were treated as solemn rituals. These kits packed with candy, ponchos, flashlights. Remember, we had to have the book bags ready for the 48-hour emergency. We had to have the year's supply of food. We had to have a 6-month supply or something of water.
As a kid, when I joined the church, it was 2 years.
Yeah, well, little by little, you don't need as much. And in these days where we're more righteous, we don't need as much. It gets less and
It
less.
finally became a 72-hour pack and then just a candy bar.
Yeah, that's right. Snickers, of course. These kits were packed with candy, ponchos, flashlights, and the occasional mysterious item were ceremonially checked twice a year under his father's leadership, but ultimately forgotten until the next drill. The pervasive culture of prepping extended beyond church to schools and neighbors, fostering a communal prepper mindset. Despite all this preparation, reality often fell flat in the church, like it often does, when his stash of dried fruit was pillaged and his kits remained untouched, destined to stay stale until, quote, someday, unquote. That laughable complacency shifted in 2020 when the COVID-19 pandemic and local earthquake struck. McCann and his husband scrambled and empty grocery shelves and home tremors, realizing their preparedness was more theoretical than practical. In panic, they unearthed decade-old canned goods with illegible labels and dodgy expiration dates. And when the quake hit, both reacted with fear and tears instead. And I'm going to take that off the screen there so I can see that.
Of the calm discipline.
Yep, of drills past. Their frantic, all-too-human response led back to the familiar refrain. Someday, we really should audit our emergency supplies. And I think this is a cool story, and I'll share why. Every once in a while, something happens where it would have been helpful for the people in that community or that neighborhood or that home to have a year's supply of food and a 72-hour kit for sure. But here was my thought. A compelling point to make is that while food storage is often touted in religious or prepper communities as essential for surviving emergencies, in almost every real-world instance, having the monetary value of that food storage available as cash in a bank account would have been far more practical and effective. Cash provides flexibility. It can buy food, fuel, medicine, transportation, or pay rent, depending on the crisis at hand. Most emergencies aren't apocalyptic breakdowns of society. They're job loss, medical bills, natural disasters, or sudden relocation. In those scenarios, what people overwhelmingly need is purchasing power, not 80 pounds of wheat in a plastic basket. Ironically, the same storage kits that were meant to ensure survival often go unused, expire, or become inaccessible, while a well-managed emergency fund could have provided immediate, targeted support. It's not that food storage has no value, but rather that in modern emergencies, cash is almost always more versatile and timely. And if you're stuck in a hospital waiting room or evacuating due to a fire, you can't trade your powdered milk for a hotel room, but you can swipe a debit card. Your thoughts?
That is an important distinction, and it gives the lie, what I consider to be the lie, to the church trying to make this more normal. It was 2 years when I joined, 1978. You can check it. 2 years food supply. And sometime after that, it went to 1. It was always apocalyptic in nature. It was to prepare for an apocalyptic emergency. It was only downgraded to, oh, well, a personal struggle or a problem in your life or getting fired or something, in order, because the apocalypse never showed up. That's the way of saying the garment doesn't really have power to protect you, right? Even though we've told you all along it has power to protect you. And now it doesn't really, protection is one of the charms it has. Apparently has other things like power and forgiveness and things like that, and protection. But I think it's just the Mormon church backing off on another of its supernatural faith claims.
Rebecca?
Which is so interesting because food storage was a huge part of my life. I've talked about my parents before, and they doubled, tripled down. They made furniture out of the food storage buckets. I bet some of you guys know what I'm talking about. You stack them up, put a sheet over it, and you've got a couch, right? And we're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds of wheat and rice and metal containers, those square vats of honey, things like that. I used to look at that and think, how will we eat this exactly? But of course, when we finally moved my parents out of my childhood home, the food storage that had been there since 1963 We couldn't even sell it to farmers. We tried. I tried to sell the honey on the Facebook Marketplace, and I got flagged as biohazard. I am forever banned from the Facebook Marketplace for trying to sell food storage honey. I'm not making this up. And, my parents were just influenced by the rhetoric of the day. If you do the word searches in conference, they talked about this all the time. The end was near, and that's what we were living with. Now, I had a different point of view. I would say, well, if people in our neighborhood know we have so much food storage, won't they just come and get it with their weapons?
That's why you have to have guns.
Yeah, we don't have that. We just have, the food storage. And my dad will say, well, then that's what's going to happen. And I think, oh my, the apocalypse was very frightening to me. But I had kind of a workaround. I thought, okay, so what do people need beside food? Well, they need makeup, I think. So every time I would buy makeup from like Lancome or Clinique or something and get that free gift with purchase, I would save it. I had this huge vat of like little makeup samples. And I thought, in the last days, I'm going to trade this for food. What woman is not going to give me like a bag of wheat for this mascara? That was my plan. Luckily, it never came to that, but I was thinking in an entrepreneurial way. Now, I will say what you're talking about, how food storage now is promoted. It really is more realistic. I will give them credit for that because I've had food storage and then suffered a job loss, and I have eaten the food storage. And so that was very practical to look in my cupboard and go, you know what? We have a month or so. We have a couple months. So I think they have dialed back that rhetoric, and it's not so terrifying anymore. But you're right in this article. Sorry, swiping a debit card is really all you need.
Would you have benefited greater by taking the equivalent value, having it in a savings account and having it collect interest, and when that job loss happened, being able to?
Oh, yeah.
And I think, by the way, we can all look to the church. How much wheat does the LDS Church have in total? How much powdered, flour and sugar and water does it have? And how much purchasing power does it have? And remember, it was, I think, Elder Bednar who said that the reason the church has saved up so much money is so that it has the 7 years of plenty for the 7 years of famine. He wasn't pointing to the food storage it had on hand. He was pointing to the 200 and something billion dollars that it had invested and set aside.
The very fact they focus on food, I think, is decisive that it's apocalyptic. Otherwise, why not just keep your money, don't buy that food, and then when the apocalypse hits, go to, I don't know, Burger King or something. Get something you'd like to eat, because they're going to be open.
Did you guys ever work at the cannery or anything like that?
Yeah, I've done that.
How many hours did we all spend doing that? Absolutely. Yep.
By work, you don't mean paid. You just mean go and serve.
Yes. The kind of that weird meat stuff that you'd have to stuff in those cans. Yeah, I don't know if I'll ever get over that. But yeah, it was for the last days.
Was it moving?
I think it was before it came to me in the assembly line. My job was to hit it and make sure it was dead and then put it in the can.
Good.
Well, there is one more little story here that I've got. It was just a podcast that came out this week on Mormon land. Tom Christofferson, episode 398. The money quote is at the top of the Salt Lake Tribune's article about the podcast. Christofferson is quoted, and I listened to it today. He did say this. He said, talking about his partner, he has forgiven me for choosing the church over him, says LGBTQ advocate Tom Christofferson. So the main message in the podcast was the church has made some progress on the issue of homosexuality and what it allows in the church and how it treats those who are in the LGBT community, but that it has a lot of work to go. But if folks will remember, he is the brother of, and I think I misplaced
I think the rest of your story is down below mine.
Yeah, I'll try to go find it here really quick. But Tom Christofferson is the brother of D. Todd Christofferson. And he was in a romantic relationship with a man, homosexual relationship, and he left his partner in order to essentially go back to activity in the church and has remained celibate ever since. There's a picture of Tom. Again, there's the quote. He, referring to his past romantic partner, has finally forgiven me for choosing the church over him. This is Tom and, of course, Apostle D. Todd Christofferson. And my note about him seeing both progress and a long way to go for the church. it sort of points back to last week on the newscast when we covered Stephen Snow, former church historian, and his thoughts on having been affected by interacting with his granddaughters who are something other than heterosexual, and that caused him to reflect and to change his point of view about a lot of things. And so here you have Tom, who's sort of gone the other way, which is to go back to the church, that direction, in an effort, I think, in a genuine effort to help the church move or shift, to be a part of that change, but making a huge sacrifice along the way. So there's that. Any thoughts from you guys on Tom Christofferson? Folks can check out that podcast.
I have some thoughts. That and the book that he wrote really bothered me, that he gave up his committed partner. And 3 years ago, there was an article where he said he was ready to begin dating again. And there were lots of posts about that 3 years ago. And that made me mad too, because I thought, you gave up your committed partner to write this book, to be part of the church. And then a few years later, you're ready to then begin dating, looking for a romantic relationship. I haven't heard much since then, but I do know at the time, I just thought, this is irresponsible to put this book out, because I feel like a lot of faithful LDS parents might shake this book at their kids who are in committed relationships and say, look, you can come back. Just end this and come back, and that's not everyone's scenario at all.
Yeah. Yeah. It's obviously it's Tom's choice to make. I don't know him. I'm sure he's a wonderful guy. I do wish him the best. And I hope, though I somewhat fear, that he will rue this decision before it's over. Because the church has a long established track record of using you and then screwing you and throwing you to the side.
Yep. Discarding you the moment your usefulness is over. So, all right, Rebecca, back to you on a story about maybe some baby names tied to Mormonism.
Baby names, yes. And it's true. This all, of course, is Tom's, it's his life and everything. But I just remember my reaction initially was like, oh, so. All right. Yes, I've been trying to do this story for a while, but I keep bumping it because so much other news comes out. But this was an article actually from back in May where they talk about Oakley. Parents branch out to oak-based baby names, especially in the red states. And this has everything to do with Utah, apparently, which is interesting. It says, although Olivia and Liam are the two most popular names for newborns right now, according to the Liam, isn't that interesting? Liam Nelson, I think. Yeah, something. Another name is rising in popularity, and that is Oakley, or Oakley, all the different ways that you can spell it, and especially in the red states. The name is usually, but not always, given to girls. Clearly, there's a pattern, says Dallin D. Oakes, an English linguistics professor at Brigham Young University in Provo. Really? Dallin D. Oakes. I'm sorry. That just made me laugh. But he's a BYU professor, and he's been tracking these patterns. He has reviewed the data for red and blue states as ranked politically by the International Business Times. And he says that this name is becoming really popular among LDS people, too. So he says that every one of the top 10 red states either had an Oaklyn or an Oakley or both, or something in the top 100 names, he said. On the other hand, and in comparison, they were only represented in 2 of the blue states that he sampled. So very interesting. None of this is surprising to Cleveland Evans. All these professors have very interesting names. A professor and former president of the American Name Society. He clocked the Oakley trend a few years ago. That one is one of those things that is coming out of Utah, he said. Utah is sort of an early warning system for things that are going to become popular. This has to do with Latter-day Saint culture or Mormon culture, and they are people who have unusual names. I think we can all attest to that.
Look at all the people in the red states called Mormon now.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
I mean, the name Mormon. You know what I mean.
The actual name Mormon. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. So examples include Jaden and Caden. I'm guessing everyone in the chat is going, oh, yeah, my niece named her child that, or my sister.
Yeah. I haven't heard of these.
Oakley, Oaklyn, Oakley, he says. And as to why so many popular ones have emerged from LDS culture, he says, I could speculate maybe we have more kids in other states, or maybe more of us are influencers that put our baby names out there, right? They're in social media, that like the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. All those women have kids that have names that are very unique, and now everybody knows those names. So it says the population of the state of Utah is estimated at between 62 and 68% LDS. And there's a blogger, Hildy Westenhaver, and she points out something unusual about the names that Mormons choose to give their children. Maybe it's because we're kind of different to begin with, that Mormons love oddball baby names. Westenhaver wrote in her blog, I have met children named Wrangler, Smokey, Mercedes, Corporate, that's a girl's name, Mavericks, Gennady, Silver, I don't know how you'd even say that, Ziason, Versailles, Rafter, and I kid you not, R2. Well, that tracks Mormons and Star Wars, right? So, but once I started thinking about it, I realized I also know people that have very unusual baby names. She said that some names may sound normal when spoken, but just to be different, the Mormons get creative with the spelling. I think we've seen this before. Paisley spelled Payzlee, Jared spelled with a D.
That's just ridiculous. You're sentencing your kid to having to spell out his freaking name every time he meets somebody for the rest of his life.
Yep,
or
that's
her life.
Miracle, Myracal. And I have to admit, I'm guilty of that. My children, I sort of switched up vowels when it was typically an O. I would make it an E. I did that.
Example,
I admit.
please. Example.
Well, no, I'm not going to reveal the names of my children, but I'm just saying when the vowel is usually this, I would change it, from an A to an E or an O to an E, something like that.
What possessed you to do something like that?
I was trying to be really cool and fit in with the people in my ward. And I think that's another thing. You're connected to all these women who are all having children, and they're all talking about the baby names, and everything's unique. And you have to do something really unique so your child will stand out in nursery where there's, back in the day, 200 kids under 18 months. So it says, the blogger observed that boys' names tend to lean toward having two syllables with an ER, an EN, or a ton. And my children are the two syllables exactly like that. The ending, which preserves the uniqueness: Truxton, Deccan, Nyler, Kyson, Taton, Zyker, Truson.
Wait, this is not on the slide, right?
Is it not on the slide? Oh, maybe it's not. Sorry, I'm reading the other. Maybe I'm on the other slide. Nope. It's on this slide here. There we go.
Zyker.
Yep, Zyker. Isn't that interesting? Maybe we're giving some of our viewers and listeners some ideas. I don't know. Maybe
Hopefully
we
ideas
are.
about what to avoid.
Yeah, maybe girls' names almost always contain the letter what? I bet you can guess without even reading that. The letter Y. All Mormon girls have the Y in it, right? The Casey, the Oakland, the Tinsley, the Skyland, all of it, all the time. So then the blogger gets into the why of the matter, and she says, why on earth would somebody name a baby Serendipity?
Why indeed?
Why indeed? Tradition is the obvious answer. These oddly named babies are the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the Delins, Cloydine, Laverle, right?
I don't see this as any excuse to name your child Serendipity, especially with that strange spelling.
See, and you guys were converts. So you may not have these names in your family, but I have all three of those names in my family. So Mormons definitely like to
have
combine
Serendipity
names.
in your family?
No. The old names, Delin, Laverle, Cloydine, those kinds of names where you kind of combine family names or a first name and a last name. Mormons like to put la in front of everything or da in front of everything. It's a really interesting phenomenon. She says, as I said before, we Mormons are used to being a little bit different, and it's been that way for a long time. So I went on social media to try to find out what are some of the weird Mormon names that just regular people have heard.
I know the Mormon apologists like Psych Word Radio, they like to put duh in front of everything.
Well, there is that. So here are some ones that came across on social media. I thought these were great. And these are, again, from just people on Reddit chiming into what they've heard. Twin boys born in 2010-11 named Mitt and Romney. Okay. That's a good one. Bill's shaking his head. I know of a family that named their daughter Temple Marriage. I shit you not. First name was Temple. Middle name was Marriage. There you go. I know a girl named Kumora. I went to school with a Coriantimer, but thankfully his parents split it into Corey Antimer.
Nobody can find the girl named Kimora anymore. They think she's in multiple locations, but nobody knows exactly where she's at.
Where is she? We don't know.
The FBI.
And I do see posts from people that say, I've stepped away from the LDS Church and my name is Coriantimer, right? Some people actually change their name kind of as an act of, breaking free. This person says, I know a family that has a Leahona, Hosanna, Kimora, Ammon, and Caleb. So that's a good one. Zionica. What do you think of that? I think I'm pronouncing that right. Zionica.
I think it's a
Interesting.
musical instrument.
Yeah, I feel like it could be. This person says, I'm a teacher in Utah. Previous male student names included Taft, Ammon, Ezra, Benson, Malachi, Ephraim, Levi, Asher, Elijah, Enoch, Brigham, Noah, Hiram, and the honorable mention to Moroni as a middle name. And you see a lot of kids named after prophets, right? Kimball, Benson, things like that all the time. This person says, I had a friend named Monhanrai. I was the only kid at his birthday party one year. I'm sorry.
The only kid at his birthday party? Poor Mahanrai.
That's what I'm saying. It's a double-edged sword to give a unique name like that, right?
He was probably a terrible kid. He was lucky to have one boy at his party.
I get to see the invitation. Mahanrai is inviting you to his dinosaur party. Yep, there you go. I know a Porter Rockwell Jones. Okay, that's a good one. A friend of mine named their son Kolob.
That's like the happy birthday thing that you send out on my birthday and everybody else's birthday. It goes, Mahanrai.
That's right. Yeah, I don't think I could find one that said that. Yep, it's not going to work. A friend of mine had named their son Kolob. I wish I was joking, but I knew a kid named Iron Rod. I met him at a youth activity. I'm sorry.
He knew a kid. He says, I wish I was joking, but I did know a kid named Iron Rod.
Yeah, that's what he said. If you want to believe this person, he said he knew a kid that he met at a youth activity named Iron Rod. Here's one, Abinadi Burns, actual first and last name.
Abinadi Burns.
I mean, Mormons are creative.
I don't believe that. I mean, come on. You're supposed to give your kid a name, not a joke.
Do you know, the thing
It's
is,
a funny joke, but I
do
hope that's not a
believe
real name.
I bet if you ask the people in the chat, they know names that are just as strange as these. I bet that they do. I knew a girl named Moroniah, I think. Moroniah. I'm not exactly how you would say it. And finally, my favorite, last but not least, I knew a guy named Thummim.
No.
This is what these people say. So the bottom line is very strange names in Utah, but it's up to the parent. You can do what you want to do, but it does cause problems when you step away from, the LDS tradition and your name means something there. And when your own name can be triggering, that can be a problem. So
your name is to me. I got a trivia question for you, Rebecca.
What is it?
Okay. So what Broadway Hollywood musical does the song come from that is They Call the Wind Moroni?
That is, oh my gosh, why can't I think of it now? It's a terrible movie.
Sorry, thank you
no, it's a horrible movie.
Gift.
It's Paint Your Wagon. No, is it? Is it Paint Your Wagon?
Is that your guess?
No, it's not my guess because I know that's not right. But it had I'm
pretty sure it's Paint Your Wagon.
Is it Paint Your Wagon? Okay, then I was right. I was close. I get flustered, when I put on the spot.
Fresnell sang it.
Yeah.
That one isn't hard to pronounce, Rebecca. You just say moron and then Aya on the end. Moron Aya.
I know. I feel like you could pronounce it that way. So anyway, but again, you guys don't have that background. You were converts, so you don't have family names that are like that.
The really bad thing about that Moroni is that the Aya part is a theophoric suffix, which means Jehovah. So what's saying is Jehovah is a moron. Is actually the translation of that name. It's really quite iconoclastic.
Well, he certainly doesn't see around corners.
In the pure Adamic language, it's a cool name, right? It's just our fault that we don't speak that.
I did give a Mormon name to one of my kids, but I put it as a middle name because a part of me thought, if that kid doesn't stay in the church or our family doesn't stay in the church, I just don't want it to haunt him the rest of his life. So he can just write the initial and put a dot after it and call it a day. All right. Let's go to the next story. We've got this here.
Yeah, I have two more quick ones right here. And I will say a lot of Christians do give their kids biblical names, so there's precedent for it everywhere. Not so much the girls, but the boys. So, okay. So the next two, I thought I was done with my slides, and then two things just popped up on my radar really quick that I had to just discuss, mostly because this one involves our favorite, Bradley R. Wilcox, right? There he is.
I got to say something, okay?
Yeah. Okay.
That's a picture of Bradley Wilcox. That's a good picture. That's the best picture I've ever seen of Bradley Wilcox.
Is it because it's dark?
I think it's because he's not smiling.
Oh. Oh, yeah, he does look very serious because this is a very serious topic. So
He
this
has a
is-
good, serious look, and that his profile is better than his straight-on shot, I think.
Well, there you go. And it seems like he has a new haircut. Doesn't that kind of look like a new haircut? In fact, I would not have recognized him almost had I not seen it written that it was Bradley Wilcox. So this was in the church news. This is a mountaintop experience. New Heber Valley Camp Night Walk aims to help youth look unto Christ. So, of course, they've been covering darkness and night in Heber Valley for almost 2 years now, right? With the temple being built and the county commission waiving all dark skies ordinances so the temple can eventually be built. And here is a camp that wants it to be dark. This is how they operate, in the darkness. So let me tell you guys what this is all about. And I can't wait to get your reaction. So it says, the sunlight faded into the night. Brother Bradley R. Wilcox, first counselor of the Young Men's General Presidency for now, right, because he was released, stood on a rock and addressed the group. Weeks after its installation at the church's Heber Valley camp, he said, thousands of youth have already traversed the dimly lit trail, calling it incredible and life-changing. Now, I have to explain to you what this is. It is a nighttime trail. They take the kids up there in the evening, right? Where it's beautiful to be out in nature in the evening. If you've ever sat around a campfire or, looked at the stars, that's not what they're doing here. What they've done is they've created a path where they have video screens, TVs, hooked up to, I'm assuming, some kind of generator where they're showing, LDS videos about the life of Christ. They have walkways with signs, about Jesus and LDS dogma. They put noise canceling headphones on the youth. That's what you're seeing right here. So they're not hearing the natural
You wouldn't want to hear
sound.
those birds chirping or anything.
That's what I'm saying. None of that. We're not going to hear the birds, the cicadas. We're not going to hear anything like that. We're going to have a noise canceling headphone on. And then what you hear in your ear are inspirational quotes, conference snippets.
It's general conference in the woods.
Exactly. So, I mean, here's a picture. Look, I can't make this stuff up, honestly.
Is that like Bigfoot or something on the right?
No, that's a picture of Christ, right? So it says the 1.3 mile walk divided into 9 checkpoints starts with participants receiving noise canceling headphones. Groups of 20 to 30 hike the path, listening to recorded audio with thought-provoking dialogue, church leaders' quotes, and inspirational music while passing large images and television screens out in the forest, depicting scenes from the Savior's life. Now, I was thinking about this, why this was bothering me so much today. And I was talking it over with my co-host, Landon, and I'm just like, nature is something that a lot of people who step away from the LDS Church discover suddenly. And they get that elevated emotion from nature. They have aha moments. They touch, divinity, spirituality through nature. And they kind of go, wow, I feel this way more than I felt in church. So I kind of feel like they're just hijacking nature with this sensory deprivation kind of a thing, with noise canceling headphones where they're just pumping conference talks. They're having you walk down a path so you kind of feel like you're in nature, but you've got these big screens. I don't know. I can't quite put my finger on why.
As Thoreau said, we can never have enough of Mormonism.
Yeah,
and I just realized that picture on the right, that's the 1832 account of the first vision.
Yeah, it probably is. I don't know. But then it says the young women and young men's general presidencies who were introduced to the concept last fall hope to replicate the experience for youth worldwide. So maybe they'll be traipsing through the Brazilian jungles. I don't know what they're going to be doing in the coming years. And it's a huge effort to put this together, but you can see the pictures there. Right there on the left is a giant, candles lit. It's almost like a huge altar to Christ. This has a lot of earmarks of kind of Catholicism to me. And then you can see the signs that they put up along the way. When you start down the path, you have to journal about a trial that you're having. You have to think of something that you're doing wrong. Yeah. And I'm guessing probably everybody's going to write porn. I don't know. And then you walk down this path and you kind of make a resolution to do better, to try better. But I don't know, maybe you guys can put your finger on more why this bothers me so much. But
you have this thing up here that I want you to explain to me, where it says that on this little sign, I am enough. That's an anti-Mormon doctrine. That's never taught in Mormonism.
Exactly. You're never enough in Mormonism. But it reminds me of a time when I went to girls' camp back in the 80s, and I took some not Mormon friends from high school, went with our friend group, and we had a carnival of life, right? Those role-playing things that they used to do in the 80s, and different stations you would go to, and you could win tickets, and if you got enough, you could go to the celestial kingdom. And to me, it was normal because there'd been those kinds of role-playing things all along when we were youth. But these girls that were not LDS, they walked out and they said, Rebecca, that's like the weirdest thing I've ever seen. That's super weird and creepy. And I remember thinking, is it? I mean, I didn't know because I was so indoctrinated into that. But that was the first inkling that I got that some of these things are actually not only not great, but could be harmful.
Well, they're certainly trying to give their youth a spiritual experience. And they actually say this in a number of places, that this trip, this 1.3 mile Jesus walk, is designed to give personal spiritual experiences.
Yeah, I don't know what else there is to say. I think this kind of thing would work in any religion. You could get the Jehovah's Witnesses out in the woods and do the same thing and play the quotes of their leaders, and they would feel something. The youth of the Jehovah's Witnesses would have a spiritual experience, as RFM is pointing out. It could be the Catholics, it could be the Methodists, it could be the Pentecostals, it could be the Scientologists, it could be anybody. And it's a way to make people think they had a Mormon experience when really all they had was a human experience.
Exactly.
I just told my wife this halibut was good enough for Jehovah.
Yeah, I don't know. So I don't know.
A dingo ate my baby. A dingo.
That's right. The dingo ate my baby. Yeah. I don't know if anyone in the chat has a kid that has attended something like this or what your thoughts are, but I just couldn't put my finger on, it was hijacking a natural human elevated emotion experience, the aha you get from nature that a lot of post-Mormons discover for the first time, when they kind of step away and have Second Saturday, and it's just closing you off with, sensory deprivation and putting you on a path where you are inundated with these messages. And I don't know, it just really bothered me, but all right. One last thing that is breaking news today, and I'm calling this dirty soda is okay, but dirty dancing is not okay. And this is happening in Provo, and we've got ourselves a real life Footloose situation. And I'll just kind of describe for the sake of time what's happening. There's a rec center in Provo, and for about 3 years, they've been offering this dance class called Dirtylicious Dance, right? And it's kind of like hip hop and all kinds of like power moves. Men and women take this class. People from the city council or the city staff have attended this class, and there has been no problem with this class whatsoever. It's just been really fun, and it's been going on for several years. Until it says a man somehow saw a video of this fitness class. Let's be very clear. It's a fitness class that uses dance, much like Zumba. Remember that craze? But this is more a modern dance, kind of the dancing that you would see maybe on Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, right? I can't do it very well, but and it's fitness. It's a fitness dance. So a man came across this video and he said, oh no, this is not happening, not happening in our town, right? And he went to the city council in Provo and he said, there's this terrible thing going on at the Provo Rec Center, and this does not reflect the morals or the values of our town. And the city council looked at some video footage and they said, yeah, it doesn't reflect the morals or the value of our town. And so they contacted the people who created the class and the instructors, and they said, we're shutting you down. And the instructors and the people who created the dance class said, well, what's wrong with it? They couldn't tell them exactly. Just overall, the look and feel was not reflective of the values of the town. Where is Kevin Bacon when we need him, right? We need him standing up at that pulpit. We need him giving the biblical speech, a time to dance. So they have canceled the class altogether. They got 200 people to sign a petition and said, we don't want this dance class in our rec center. And I have a little bit, I think Bill's going to pull it up just to show you guys what we're talking about.
It's a wildly popular dance fitness craze, all different kinds. This one called Dirtylicious, and it was taught 4 days a week, packing them in at the Provo Rec Center until the classes were abruptly canceled. Hello, I'm Fox 13 News.
Yep, you can kind of see there. And like I said, all the news is picking it up right now.
You want more of that
And
played, Rebecca?
what was that?
You want more of that played?
No, I think it's okay. She just kind of goes in to talk about what I just told everybody. So anyway, I mean, I guess, a city can control what's offered at a rec center and this, but I have to say, have you watched, I don't know, the Cougarettes or any kind of cheer team or, it's kind of extremely similar to all of that. But because one person saw it and said, I don't like this, therefore you can't do this, and the fact that it's happening in Provo, I think that's why it's getting a lot of play. I wish the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives women would get on board here and come out and say this class should be allowed because this is basically the way that they dance, right? And they're wildly popular.
It's good to know that one person can still make a difference. Don't you agree, Rebecca?
Yeah, there's always that one person, right? There's always that wet blanket. It's been going on for years. That's the thing. And it's, very attended, the classes are full. People love it. They're talking about how it's empowering and it's fun. And what they do is they actually teach their students a whole dance routine, like it's a whole dance. And so they learn this and then they can perform it and they're getting a workout at the same time. And it's just really fun. But if somebody looks at it through a different lens and says,
A righteous lens?
I guess they might think it was righteous. I would probably use another word.
What
So
word would you use?
Well, I don't know. We'll keep an eye on this story, but I just thought it was really funny with all the parallels to Dirty Dancing and to Footloose, of course, where you can't
Where's
do that.
Kevin Bacon when you need him? He's more than 6 degrees away.
He was actually just in, was it Payson?
Lehigh.
Yeah, last year. He in Lehigh. Yeah, I know the
For
roller
graduation.
wasn't the high school that they filmed it out in somewhere
Was it
else?
last
Anyway.
year? Was it their last year or was it
Yeah,
the
it was
40th
just
anniversary?
recently. Yeah, he was in town. So I think he might be interested in this story. If anybody is 6 degrees separated from Kevin Bacon, get a hold of him. Call him.
Yes.
So I think that's it. I think that's all I have.
Love it. All right. Well, I'll add to the stage this graphic that folks are used to seeing. And I'll also just note before we get into what's going on next week, Rebecca Biblioteca, Radio Free Mormon, and myself will be in Salt Lake City on August 4th. You're going to want to grab the tickets for that. We've got somewhere around, I think, 20 tickets sold. There's about 30 tickets remaining for the live showing of the
Is that for
Mormon
August 4th?
August
on Monday?
4th,
Monday night.
Monday. Doors open at 5:30. We'll have a little opening act by Ganesh, I believe, at 5:45, and then at 6 p.m. promptly the newscast will begin, and we'll go our normal time. And then when that's over, we'll have a little munch and mingle. A little, what's the linger longer, which is the other phrase.
That is what you've been struggling for. I could have helped you with that. That's what we call it up here, is the linger longer.
The linger longer and the munch and mingle, and both of those sound really gross to me.
And
but
nobody wanted to linger longer, especially when church was 3 hours.
Sometimes
We'd already lingered long enough as far as we were concerned.
Sometimes the smells in a chapel lingered way too long anyway. So there's that. But August 4th, Salt Lake City. I just put the link up in the live chat, so you're going to want to grab the tickets for that. There's that, and I'll put the other one here down below. So HTTPS, and then you've got the donorbox.org/events/7840033. Those tickets are going, 5 to 10 tickets a week. We got a few more weeks to go. You're going to want to grab those because the closer we get to it, it seems the faster those will disappear. What do you guys have going this week for your respective shows?
Oh, yeah. I think mine is tomorrow night, always the Tuesday slot. So, as I mentioned before, during the newscast, there is a new Lori Vallow jailhouse interview. And she talks a lot about her religious beliefs. She talks about following the prophet. She mentions that she believes she is still an active member. So, and she mentions that she visits Chad through a portal and she talks to Jesus every day.
Rebecca, I'm sorry to interrupt. You said she still considers herself an active member. Has she been excommunicated?
No, she does not know that she has. And I've been posting about this and doing some shorts about this. Now, Chad was arrested in June of, 2020, whatever. A month later, we have a copy of his letter from his stake that says, we are holding a court for you. You can go ahead and submit a written, statement or defense. There is no such letter that we know of for Lori. And she says that she has not been notified that she has been excommunicated, and she believes that she is an active member. So it's up for debate, but she says she has not been told. And we can see that Chad was notified, even though he was incarcerated, of the proceedings. So I feel like she would have been notified. Now, maybe she just didn't, maybe she forgot. Maybe she's, just not saying it. But in this interview, she says,
there's a difference here, isn't there, in how she's being treated versus how the church treated
Tim Ballard,
ne'er-do-well who was out there saving, not saving.
Tim Ballard, he was excommunicated right away, and they let everybody know. This is what I'm saying. They are not making a point to let everybody know that they have excommunicated Lori Vallow like they did Tim Ballard. So
why do you think that is?
I can't imagine why that is, because I feel like she has done things that are way more egregious than what Tim Ballard did. But what Tim Ballard did blew back on the apostles, right? On the church, his connection to Elder Ballard. And so maybe that's when they make it very public. Anyway, we're going to be talking about this interview and all the revelations therein with her cousin, the amazing Megan Connor. So this will be tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. And we'll link this interview in our show notes for those of you that haven't seen it before. It's only about an hour long. But the one thing I did learn from the interview is that her favorite candy is peanut M&Ms. Well, that's mine too. So I don't know what that says, but we share a favorite candy. So
she's definitely done worse than Nemo. She's definitely done worse than Jeremy Runnels, and
or you or John DeLynn, or Natasha Helfer, or
strange thing. It's a strange thing.
It is.
All right. Well, there's that. RFM, what do you have going this week?
And Rebecca, don't worry about it. A lot of murderers like peanut M&Ms.
Well, do you know what? I actually felt sorry for her, because she said to the reporter, "Will you bring me peanut M&Ms?" And he talked about that at the beginning, and he brought them for her. And at the end, she goes, as they were leading her out, "Can I have the M&Ms?" And the guard said, "No." So
no.
I did kind of feel sorry.
You can't have the M&Ms. Good. I don't think she should be having anything.
I know.
That she wants for the rest of eternity. Hey, look at this. This is something that went on over the weekend, and it didn't have my picture on it. I'd like the picture, Bill. That is a picture. And look at the hands on that guy.
Yeah.
Those are like the David's hands. But it's just because they're closer to, there's 4. Yeah.
This
anyway,
got me credit, RFM. You give this one a spiel, because I don't think this is getting enough views, and you really have a breakthrough episode here.
I do, yes. Thank you for mentioning that. It's huge. It's big. It's Mormon Easter eggs. And now it's got me on there, because I think that maybe people aren't listening to it enough, because originally on the thumbnail, there wasn't anything that really identified it with me. So now it's me. It's got the RFM and Joseph Smith, but he's hiding the Easter eggs. And what he's doing is he is intentionally fulfilling and making good on the promise that the Book of Mormon / Joseph Smith made in 1 Nephi 13, that there's been all this stuff that's been all these truths taken out of the Bible, and they're going to be restored in the last days through the books of scripture that Joseph Smith is going to produce. And he's going to make that happen. And he did make that happen. We show how he made that happen. We've been talking for years now about how he made that happen, but maybe just without this particular angle on it, that this is what he's doing. He's making his dreams come true. He's making his scriptural productions reflect things that were lost. And he's finding the things that were lost to put in his scriptural productions by perusing and winnowing source material of his day, such as the Adam Clark Bible commentary, and especially here in this episode, a new light on Josephus as well.
Yeah, and I think, by the way, I watched this the day it got published. I was able to watch it actually before it went out, because I have access to it, because I'm the one who publishes it, and watched it. And I think your list was it 6 pieces? 6. Yeah. And you made it, I'll use my word, you made it demonstrable to me. By the time you went through that list, and I got to see the actual final thing of all 6 listed, it becomes crystal clear to me that there is a direct connection between Joseph Smith restoring ancient scripture and the contemporary access to an ancient document written by the historian Josephus. So, yeah,
isn't it amazing? All I know is that I know you always have to be careful with parallels, right?
Yeah.
This seems very, very strong to me. Not all of them are of equal weight. You put all 6, I mean, some of them are remarkable. You put them all together, I think it's pretty conclusive. And when I think about it, I also think, how would the Mormon apologists be reacting if Josephus and all these connections were not a book that Joseph Smith had, but it had been buried in the sands of Egypt or somewhere and only discovered after Joseph Smith was dead. That's all they'd be talking about, believe me, because it would prove that Joseph Smith was restoring ancient truths that had been lost, which is exactly what he did. He tells us what he's going to do, and then he went and did it.
It would be one of the most touted evidences for the truthfulness of the church. It would be the true way of using evidence, sort of like they do in the Book of Abraham essay, pointing to ancient stories that Joseph didn't have access to, except that he had access to Josephus, where very connected, demonstrable connections are that you point out. I think you did a great job. I don't know how you came to the research of arriving at all 6 of those.
I will tell you and also say it on Friday, okay? But the main thing was this. Oh, those 6, because someone else had done that research. And I had found it when I was researching something else a few weeks ago. And I saw that. I said, holy, I got to come back to this. But right now I'm doing this other thing. So I finally had time to come back to this. And I was talking about it in terms of, and because we were talking back and forth, how do we present this? What does a thumbnail look like? And it's going to be about restoring ancient truths, right? And we're talking about, and it's the lost and found, right? And they have Joseph Smith behind the counter at the lost and found. And we're talking about putting Josephus over there on the shelf, along with all these other items that are in the lost and found. And then you had done all this work on this, Bill. And I've been talking with you, and it was the evening, and I can't remember what evening it was, but all of a sudden we got off the phone, and I'm thinking about it. I went, holy crap, it's Easter eggs. They're Easter eggs. Everybody knows what an Easter egg is in our society right now. And even I know, because, Marvel movies. So I know about Easter eggs. I get most of the Easter eggs in Marvel movies. So we got that situation. Everybody knows what they are. And this is exactly what Joseph Smith was putting in his scriptural productions, was Easter eggs, in order to signal to those who knew, and there were quite a few who knew, that this showed that he really was restoring ancient truths that had been lost, or at least in his mind, that's what he thought.
This was the previous thumbnail, and this one's just so much better. So I like it a lot. There you go.
Like Nicolas Cage.
And then quickly, what do we have going on Wednesday night? This Wednesday, Mormonism
That
Live.
is such a secret. And the reason it's a secret is because, well, I'm not going to tell you why it's a secret. It's a secret because it's so damn special, okay? It's going to be so special. It's still a little bit, I don't know, up in the air, but I think it's going to come through. And if it doesn't, we'll do something else that'll be just equally as magnificent.
Excellent. Well, very
So I hope
good.
you'll join us at 6:00 p.m. Mountain Time on Wednesday for a very special and significant episode of Mormonism Live.
Excellent. And then Friday, we have Mormonism After Dark at 8 p.m. And so if you want to have a good time, cut loose a little bit, also be part of the show by calling in, please do. Also, I'll just say, please subscribe. If you're watching this on the Mormonish channel, please go over to the Mormon Discussion channel and subscribe there. If you're watching this on Mormon Discussion, please go over to the Mormonish channel and subscribe to Rebecca Biblioteca and Landon Brophy and
Landon Brophy.
No, yeah, not you.
The number 2 over there.
Brandon Lofi. Nobody knows.
I did that. That's what my brain did at
know.
first.
I had Brandon Lofi.
I will say, I looked at my channel today. I only need 15 more subscribers to hit 11,000. That's
Guys,
good for us.
we can do
So
that
I hope
right
somebody
now.
does.
We can do that right now for Rebecca. If
someone
you'll
does.
just go over to her channel right now. You can open up a new window so that way you don't lose us talking, and hit subscribe. And let's give Rebecca that 11,000 subscribers. Her and Landon do a great job over there. And then also, folks, both podcasts, the Mormonish podcast, Mormon Discussion, we survive on donations. So please, if you want to donate to Mormonish, you want to donate to Radio Free Mormon, you want to donate to Mormonism Live, go to those appropriate places and donate to help us keep doing this kind of work. We really appreciate each of you. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave your comment down below. Which story was your favorite? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you, and we appreciate every one of you being here. Thank you for joining the Mormon Newscast, and have a great night, everybody, and we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.
That's a wrap for this week's edition of the Mormon Newscast. We appreciate you tuning in and sharing this time with us. Keep the conversation going and stay informed on all things Mormonism. Until next week, wishing you peace and joy. See you next Monday at 6 p.m. on the Mormon Newscast.